Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest, somebody I've talked to many, many times. Her name's Roberta Glass of the True Crime Report. And we're going to talk about a very topical, very important subject, one that is in the news, very important, and that's the issue of transgenderism, is what is going on in the present day, what's the past. But I do know that once Biden came into office January 20th, he immediately signed an executive order titled the Executive Order on Preventing and Combating Discrimination on the Basis of Gender Identity or Sexual Orientation. And that was the kind of nomenclature and verbiage that was used was about respect, dignity, and about people living without fear and not being discriminated against. And a notable author who's written about the subject, her name is Abigail Schreier, and she's definitely she's very suspect about the whole transgender movement. She wrote a book titled Irreversible Damage, the Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, and that was published just last year, June 2020. She tweeted, quote, "On day one, Biden unilaterally eviscerates women's sports. Any educational institution that receives federal funding must admit biologically male athletes to women's teams, women's scholarships, etc. A new glass ceiling was just placed over girls." So that's also what happened back in January. There's the Equality Act, which Roberta Glass mentioned in our kind of pre-show. And also I have a video that I'm going to play the audio of, and it'll go out on the broadcast. But it is of Senator Rand Paul discussing the appointment of Rachel Levine into Health and Human Services. So it's a very interesting little exchange here, and I'm going to play it. It's about 4 minutes, so here it is.
American culture is now normalizing the idea that minors can be given hormones to prevent their biological development of their secondary sexual characteristics. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of a minor's genitalia. Like surgical mutilation, hormonal interruption of puberty can permanently alter and prevent secondary sexual characteristics. The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95% of prepubertal children with gender dysphoria will experience resolution by late adolescence if not exposed to medical intervention and social affirmation. Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor. I would hope that you would have compassion for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl who was confused with her identity. At 14, she read on the internet about something about transsexual. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. She had her breasts amputated. But here's what ultimately she says now. And this is a very insightful decision from someone who made a mistake but was led to believe this was a good thing by the medical community. I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness, except now the rest of my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding that the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. For most of our history, we believe that minors don't have full rights and the parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and to talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question.
Before I turn it over to Senator Murphy, I do want to say, Dr. Levine, I wanted to say I appreciated your thoughtful and medically informed response to Senator Paul's questions earlier in the hearing. It is really critical to me that our nominees be treated with respect and that our questions focus on their qualifications and the work ahead of us, rather than on ideological and harmful misrepresentations like those we heard from Senator Paul earlier. And I will focus on that as chair of this committee. So thank you again for your response.
All right. So there we go. Roberta, are you there?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any thoughts about that little sequence? I mean, that long sequence.
Well, Rachel Levine is from Pennsylvania, and he's someone who left his wife and own children, and he won't answer any of the questions that Rand Paul is asking him. I mean, it's absurd.
Dodge, too. It's a very strange
I'll only meet
dodge.
for, this is a public forum. He's been pushing transgendering of children and giving them what they call appropriate treatment, which we can talk about later, and pushing this ideology on children. And he won't own up to it in public. Why not? If you're such a big believer in it, why not? Why not?
Right. But here's the other thing is that he's going to be in a public position, and he dodges the question by saying, I can come to your office and explain it to you. But he's, in that context, it's so out of context. And I thought it was really craven and venal of a dodge for such a serious issue.
It's
I was not impressed.
It's absolutely, I'm sorry. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
That this is, he should be he's in a position of power. And, it's funny because you look at someone like Rachel Levine, and women are shamed all over this country for not using the proper pronouns, but no one looks at that man. And I'm not talking about how well he pulls off femininity, but, no one looks at that man and thinks that that's a woman. No one. They're trying to use, they've already changed in New York things like they've already changed the language. So instead of saying violence against women, say gender violence. But so it's like saying, if you're a man in a dress and you're performing femininity, you're just as likely as a woman to be raped. And if you're a woman, pretending to be a man or performing masculinity, you're just as likely to rape. It's like, it's just the most innocuous kind of change in our language. And I met with my local representative, and she said, there's enough room for everyone. They have been shaming women over this issue for years now, saying, there's enough, like, why are you so selfish with your womanhood? There's enough room for everyone to share. And I don't think there's a big deal about just changing the violence against women committee to gender violence. But all these changes in language are very meaningful, and it's getting the country prepared for completely ignoring biological sex. And I'm not treated, if I wanted to tomorrow announce that I'm non-binary, people are still going to treat me like I'm a woman based on my biological sex.
Right.
And it's just fun. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And the ramifications are enormous for women and girls everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, just incredible. And I think that it's very casual. And I think that the environment we're in now, nobody really wants to say anything. They're terrified. They don't want to get canceled. They don't want to be called a bigot. They don't want to be called a phobe, a transphobe.
Especially women. And I think about maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I really blew up with my family over this issue. And I had a long drive back with my mother she tried to shame me for not being kind enough and caring enough, and basically telling me I'm a terrible person because I wouldn't embrace this transgender ideology, and I wouldn't, and I should allow men in my dressing room, in my bathroom, in my spaces. And this extends to women's shelters. And in Canada, a women's shelter lost its funding for not accepting men. But these are highly traumatized women from male violence. And women and girls, I believe, deserve the right to privacy and safety in this country. And apparently that's a radical position in this day and age.
Right. And that's just one of the issues, right? There's tons of issues under the subject. We talked about whether it's transitioning as underage, and also sports, and also just a general definition of what is a man and a female. So it's it branches out from the central position of what is trans and your definition, but obviously there's a conflict between people's definition of what is a man and a woman, because these trans people truly believe that they're now women if they have biological change. And I think that that's what Rand Paul kind of inserted in his statement, is that you're changing secondary characteristics. And I think that, and so they're not saying it. And it's interesting too, because the head of that committee, if you heard that last statement, she said about Levine, it was a thoughtful and medically informed response. So she didn't even respond. And then she upbraided Rand Paul for bringing in ideological views, and like as if that he has some kind of preset ideology, what the real basic definition is. And I think that it's a very serious issue, particularly like how big is the real trans community? Is it 1% of the country?
Very small, but the men are very rich, and they have been funneling money like crazy from the Obama administration into this. And this has started, if you go to Dystopian Deep Dives, she's gone back into the 90s into with them planning this. Wow. So in the meetings that were had, and to redefine women, and that they also want to redefine how we describe women's body parts. So they want to describe women as menstruators. They want to describe our, I don't know how graphic can I be?
As graphic as you want.
Okay.
It'll be my second YouTube channel erase.
They want to call the 10% of trans identified men who have, invert their penis into, some kind of fake looking thing like a vagina. They want to call that a vagina, and they want to call women's vagina a front hole. So doulas, doulas were being inundated with this kind of stuff to be more inclusive, and instead of calling breastfeeding, to call it chest feeding.
Chest feeding, right.
So, I think it's really interesting because where the right and some of the more left meets on this is that I think the ideology is, I don't know if I'm representing this correctly, but the right feel like men should be men and masculine, and women should be women and feminine. And I think
that's the way God made it, right? So
right, sort of that kind of thing. And they have issues with homosexuality, where the people who are opposing the transgender ideology on more the left wing side are saying, look, I don't care if a man wants to wear a dress or any kind of sort of free to be you and me. If anybody had that record, if boys want to play with dolls, okay. If men want to wear dresses, okay. It just doesn't make them women. And what's interesting about transgender kids is 80 to 90% of kids that have gender dysphoria grow out of it and end up being homosexual. So, that's kind of where, but it's interesting to find that feminists are finding a platform, at the Heritage Foundation and all these people that used to be their enemy. So it's kind of an interesting time in that way, but it's a horrible time for women right now. And if the Equality Act gets passed, and that will mandate doctors to treat dysphoria affirmatively, meaning drugs, surgeries, things that, and those including puberty blockers that cannot be reversed. A lot of the side effects.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the Equality Act? I hadn't had time to really read that in detail.
Well, the Equality Act basically changes our sex-based protections as women and includes gender. So, it's a really long, involved thing, but it basically takes away all our sex-based protections.
Gotcha.
And it allows men, and they're also, what's interesting is they'll put someone out like a Rachel Levine, but there's also transgender activists like Alex Drummond in England who says he's living full-time as a trans woman with a full beard, looks nothing like a woman, but he says that he wants the world to accept him as a woman. So it really has, so basically any man at any time can declare that he is transgender and come into, in New York now, any man can come into our bathrooms, our changing rooms,
But it's also, that changing definition is so important. They had this guy, Zuby. Have you heard of this rapper? He went in and said he was a female, like literally like a regular dude, Mm-hmm. Said he was a female, did a deadlift, won the record, said he was a female. Then he went back to male. So he literally just did it to win the whatever trophy. So the whole degrading of what a woman is very serious. I mean, talk about being defeated. I mean, and the biological differences they're clearly ignoring. Like before you come out of your mom's womb, you have different chromosomes. You literally are XY and men are XX or whatever. And so at a cellular level, that's it. And the basic definition of what a female can do is procreate. These transgender men to women cannot do. Right. And the same thing is reversed to a woman to man, which is to bear, to be the seed, right? They can't do. So there's definitely real objective differences that somebody's ignoring, in my opinion.
Right. And, and the Equality Act passed in the House with, overwhelming support because it sounds so, who's going to be against equality? But and there's going to be a march in Washington, which I'm trying to get to on Monday against it. So see how that goes. But I mean,
don't you think equality? Yeah, but equality's, I mean, in certain circumstances, being all one polyglot gender, it just doesn't make sense. It's just not objectively factual. Yeah.
You know what the Rachel Levine segment with Rand Paul really represents is how little they want to debate this topic, because the transgender ideology, what it means is, I feel, okay, what does it mean when you ask a trans-identified man how he feels like a woman inside? He will say just a string of sexual stereotypes. I like pink. I like to wear heels. I always wanted to play with dolls. So it is the most regressive ideology, and they never want to debate it. And the closest you'll come is they'll say, well, you should know science, which is hilarious to me. Read a science book. Well, they're denying biological reality. That's what they never want to debate this topic, because transgender ideology makes no sense. I have, my issue, you dress any way you want, do anything you want, but it does not make you can't change your sex. You can't change your sex. I just don't believe it's possible. And, it's interesting because, there's lots of subtle cues. I saw a woman coming from afar, and she clearly had her breasts removed and she had like a stubble, and she thought she was, but everybody still sees a woman. I still see a woman on the street. There's so many subtle cues, including, socialization and just biology, differences. You just can't annihilate it.
Yeah, and I think that in my opinion, there's some serious self-deception within the transgender community to actually believe that you're authentically a woman or a man if you go through those procedures. In my opinion, you clearly aren't. There's all kinds of crazy stuff they do. And even the children, the surgeries are off the charts. And we're not even talking about, hormone blockers or whatever, hormone changes. It's like females, you get a radical mastectomy and then they reshape your chest. Mm-hmm. You make a pseudo penis from arm tissue. You get a hysterectomy and a salpingo oophorectomy, whatever that is. And then for the men, you get your penis turned into a pseudo vagina, oreectomy, breast implants, and facial feminization. So the harder elements of your jaw are changed. I mean, you can't come back to that. And that's what Rand Paul mentioned was this case of this woman.
It's basically an open wound that sometimes just smells like the colon tissue that was used to make it. That's an unfortunate side effect, and sometimes the skin atrophies. But other than that, it's great. And 90% of these men who say they're transgender do not have their penis removed. So,
Wow.
You think about that, these bathrooms, changing rooms are an area of safety for women, and men are violent. And that's the other issue that sort of corresponds with my interest in true crime, is that when a trans-identified man commits a crime, they're putting it down as a woman, and it's reported in the papers that a woman murdered someone, blah, blah, blah. So now women murder rates are
right.
skyrocketing.
What's the murder differential between men and women? 90% men, 10% women? It's
something like that.
Stronger.
I've heard different things. I just heard 96%.
Yeah.
I've heard in 86%, depends on which study. But with sexually motivated crimes like rape, you're into the 90s in differential. Yeah. Done by men, 90, in the 90s done by men.
I didn't know until you said that the supposed men do not have their penis cut off. I did not know that 90% keep it. That's shocking. They're still men. That's outrageous. Anyway, I don't
But to them, womanhood is a state of mind, and that what they say is that your genitals don't define you. And boy, wouldn't that be, I think about it as a child, when you've had to, you have daughters, it's very distressing when you can do everything before puberty, and then all of a sudden you're sort of put into this box, and the way that you behave is sort of limited, and how you're looked at is very sexualized. But I've sort of given up for women to speak up on this issue, except for a select few of really brave and fearless women, because we've just been so shamed and shamed on it, and we're just socialized to accommodate. So it's sort of
Abigail Shriver is one of them. She's got
there's a lot
of courage. Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the other part of my waking up is when in a speaker's corner about 2 years ago, a grandmother, Maria McLaughlin, was assaulted by a trans-identified man by the name of Tara Wolf. And he broke her camera, hit her, and they went to court. And the judge insisted that Maria refer to this man as a woman, and she wouldn't. And because she wouldn't, she was given no compensation. But it wasn't just that. It was that no one in the LGBTG alphabet community stood up and said, I oppose this violence against women. No one.
Wow.
No one. I'm still waiting. And then there was another event where women gathered to speak about this issue, and mostly trans-identified men in mass blocked the doorway. Julie Bindel, the journalist, was there. She filmed it. And no one spoke out against that. And the police barely did anything.
The consequences, yeah, you can be called hateful. Like, they shut down the Christian group Focus on the Family. They just shut down, I think, their Twitter account or something just by saying, hey, this guy's a man. Rachel Levine's a man. That's called hateful. So
that's
I would assume
speech.
Hate speech, right. So I assume some of what we're saying right now, criticism and analysis, would be considered hate.
Right.
And I'm actually worried for these people.
Hate speech.
Yeah, but my Well, the athletes isn't fair if somebody's a biological male who now calls himself a woman, because there's a guy in the MMA, his name was Fallon Fox, total biological male, just destroying women. Totally different.
They gave one woman a brain injury.
Yeah, a life-altering brain injury. This is fairly recent, so it's a serious issue. And I've seen pictures of like dudes, like supposedly women playing rugby. It's guys massive out there. So
and this is devastating to women, to girls' self-esteem that is built by sports, and just
bonding, camaraderie
among young girls.
Right.
You know,
something that's been around forever. So there's real serious issues. Yeah, I mean,
it's really scary. And in New York, I went to an event, the New York Public Library, which hosted Damien Echols. A twice convicted triple child killer was welcomed at the New York Public Library with open arms on probation for a night with Damien Echols, triple child killer. But women speaking on this issue, they were not allowed to speak at the public library. So we all had to get like a secret location where, because of the threat of trans activists and their violence. And we met there, and, it was a great event, but we had to meet in secret. And I don't know how, it was totally, underground. So,
amazing.
Child killers, okay. Women on this issue.
Just talking about it. Just talking
about it.
So just trying to figure out what's best, trying to apply some kind of moral sensibility. Yeah, gone. I mean, even Martina Navratilova, who's, I think, a lesbian, she said that transgender male athletes shouldn't be able to compete in one sport's gone. She got punted off an LGBT advocacy because they don't think she's an ally anymore.
She's been great on this issue, yeah.
Yeah, but the issue is different than, it's not, I think they're putting the trans people into the LGBT community, but it's somewhat different than that. Would you agree with that? That because it's about changing gender, not about sexual orientation.
There is the LGB Alliance, which is also considered, quote unquote, by the woke left transphobic. But what they're saying is that we're same-sex attracted. So there's this issue of the cotton ceiling, which means that lesbians who don't want to date trans-identified men are called transphobic, meaning they will be nice to them, but they don't want a relationship because they're same-sex attracted. That's why they're changing that word to gender, right? So same-sex attraction, that's what it means to be gay or lesbian, right?
Right.
So trans-identified men came up with this term, the cotton ceiling, to shame lesbians for not sleeping with them and for not, excuse my language, wanting to suck their girl dick, basically. And they've said that. And what's interesting is that they say that they're women, but they're so quick to violence and they're so quick to misogyny.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, and they're even the trans men, the ones I've seen, that granted, this is just my own, subjective view, very aggressive, man. Super aggressive, not really like women. Very, have you noticed that, or is it me?
Right.
Me? Maybe it is me. I don't know.
No, remember the Ben Shapiro was debating the issue, and this trans activist put his arm around Ben Shapiro and threatened to beat him up. I mean, what woman does that in a public debate on TV? I've never seen it happen. Yeah, so only men do that. So,
and wasn't there a guy? Was it the same guy in Canada who insisted on getting a Brazilian wax and then had a meltdown? And he was identified as a woman. It's very hard to keep track.
Right.
He identified as a woman, but he had male genitalia.
Right. He identified female-run businesses, immigrants, and insisted that they wax his female balls. And when they wouldn't, he took it to the tribunal in Canada and lost. But I don't know, with Canada is pretty far out on this issue. I think they knew the whole world was watching and couldn't rule in favor. But according to their laws, I don't know. I hate to support that. He's also someone who likes to go into female changing rooms and take pictures of
women.
children.
Right,
Yeah,
but
children.
wasn't he like a transgender, but still like he's like what's the other guy, the athlete who transgender? He still liked women.
Caitlyn
So
Jenner.
yeah, Caitlyn Jenner still likes women, and this dude was the same way, right? He was still attracted to women and I think they caught him, the guy from Canada, on social media saying very provocative things about women. It's so weird.
Right. It's called autogynephilia. It's a sexual fetish where basically straight men get off on, they think it's like they're demeaning themselves by being female and wearing female things. And,
Well,
the transgender community doesn't want to talk about autogynephilia, but it's,
I agree. You know what they don't want to talk
it's
about?
the
They
most
don't want to,
misogynistic fetish in the world, basically.
but they don't want to talk about the psychological things that make you want to become a woman, right? It's just your feelings. It's maybe something happened or abuse, but there's like serious. I think that the suicide rate of trans men is like 4 times the national average, right? So it's like some huge number.
I read a study in Sweden that does this affirmation, meaning that and the minute you show up with gender dysphoria, they affirm that you're the opposite sex and start on hormones and puberty blockers and surgeries. And that their suicide rate, they said, in their transgender community in Sweden, that's doing everything that the trans activists would want, is 17 times the national average.
Wow.
And I've also heard of another study that says that whether you go through a quote unquote transition or not, your suicide rate is the same.
Right.
So,
and then that's the whole thing. It's then like with the other thing, as I was reading, trying to do some research for this, a lot of these people want to transfer back. They want to go better, and their gender dysphoria, even after so the internal mental structure doesn't change even after the transformation. You know what I'm saying? Nope. So like they still are uncomfortable, whatever the dysphoria is. And like you said, the Rand Paul stat says these people think, but some people, even after the external transition, still feel dysphoria.
The 2 butchest lesbians I knew at Sarah Lawrence, one is identifying as non-binary and was featured in the Sarah Lawrence magazine as they, them. And of course I wrote in and I said, no one questioned this woman's womanhood when she was at Sarah Lawrence, whether she was secretly a man, because, and the other one has had her breasts removed. It's disturbing and sad. And I think it will show you how far self-loathing goes with women,
It's very sad. I mean, there's a real subtext of sadness in the whole wanting to change gender and not, be how you were born. I mean, we talked about this guy, David Reimer, who was one of the first guys, a Canadian guy, born male, reassigned female, following medical advice and intervention. This guy, psychologist John Money, overseed the case. There was all kinds of abuse, and both him and his brother committed suicide.
Right.
This was 1965. He died in 2004.
Right. And, the other sort of hidden victims in all this are the wives of these men who get these fetishistic desires to become the opposite sex, which they can't. And they just fixate all day on their appearance and buying dresses and makeup, and it just ruins marriages. They often, like Rachel Levine, leave their families, leave their wives. And it's also a very narcissistic kind of world, because you're constantly looking at how others look at you and how you look at yourself. If you pass enough, if people are seeing you as you see yourself, quote unquote, which I don't really think any of them really see themselves as women in that way. But I don't think I think their view of what womanhood is very sexist and limited. None of them are trying to be Katie Lang, William Ramsey.
Right.
None of them are trying to be Amelia Earhart. They all want to be Marilyn Monroe and the most objectified, sexualized type of woman. Why is that?
Excellent point. Yeah, it's really a good point. Like, what in their minds is that outlook? right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really it's a fascinating point, and that's why these discussions, just talking about it's so important, because there's so much. I mean, Rachel Levine talks. It's a nuanced, very complex field. Well, why aren't you talking about some of these nuances in public? Why are you dodging it? I think all Americans should be terrified that this guy is going to be in the Health and Human Services, honestly, without having to, contest or think about these very serious changes, irreversible changes to people in
And
the
these
public
men
sphere.
really they hate women with a passion. It's also, I didn't really realize this so much a couple years ago, but they're very interested in taking things away from women and reclaiming it as their own. So what it's like is someone coming in and saying, "What's wrong with you? I'm going to sleep on your bed. You can sleep on the sofa. What's wrong with you? You're so materialistic that you have to sleep on your bed." Now I'm just going to, and then the next day coming in and saying, so they just want to appropriate all the rights that women have fought for, and the way that we refer to our bodies, and motherhood, and all the things that come along with being a woman, including, oh gosh, it's just such a long involved thing, but including our menstruation, and it's really wild.
I
So
think it
now
works both ways,
they've
right?
taken off the woman symbol off of tampon boxes, and saying that men can menstruate too. I haven't met a man yet who can menstruate and never will, or can give birth.
It's those same things that happen, changes through life when you go through puberty for women and men. So if a woman's going to become a man, supposedly, all of that time that you've grown up as a boy or a girl, I mean, either working both ways, it's not that kind of growth. You don't have it, right? So women learn to do certain things. Boys operate in a different spectrum, and it's just like you expect to actually have all of that learned knowledge as that gender somehow transfer, even if you change your external sex organs. No way. So all that stuff that women learn, just safety, whatever, they don't have that.
Yeah, and also the other interesting thing. This is a theory, obviously I can't prove it, but my theory is on why they're so interested in transing children is because when you give puberty blockers to children, they want to make a generation of trans adults that look more like the opposite sex. They know how superficial our society is, so that it will be more accepted. So when you start earlier, you slow down you basically stop puberty, so that you have sort of a more successful transition. Right. So they want to, so that it will be more accepted, because everyone looking at Rachel Levine knows it. But if you look at someone who's more successfully passes, they think that will be. But I still say that there's a lot more to it than looks. But we're in a superficial society.
Right. And I think they can play off that. I think the majority of it is different than looks. You look like one doesn't mean you are inherently. You can write orange on the side of a pineapple. It doesn't make the pineapple an orange. So I think that kind of kind of similarity. Oh, I look externally like a woman. I think it's a very good point, because it's a lot of internal stuff, cellular, like you said.
And also the money in this is huge.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's one drug, Lupron, which was a drug that was used to treat prostate cancer. It was created to treat prostate cancer, but it was also used off-label, I believe, to treat endometriosis, which is a disease that affects women. And there was multiple class action lawsuits against it for how many side effects. And I know that in between 2013 and 2019, there were 6,379 deaths from Lupron, and 25,000 serious side effects, and even after for a woman discontinuing, what it does for a woman is it stops basically the production of estrogen, and even after discontinuing Lupron, a year later, 62% of female patients do not get the same amount of estrogen levels back to a normal level. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's tons of side effects. It's extremely dangerous. And now it's going to be, thanks to the Equality Act, they tell parents of children who say, who insist I'm the opposite sex, that, well, we can just stop their puberty and give them time to think. But some of the effects from this drug are irreversible, and we don't know if we're permanently damaging children and sterilizing them.
Right. I mean, the consequences are immense. Do you know if the Equality Act has provisions to pay for sex changes? Because I know that if you're in jail, you can get a sex change for free.
In California, you can. In Oregon, if you're 15 years old, Medicaid will pay. Planned Parenthood, it depends which state you're in, but it's their real bread and butter. I know Abigail Shire interviewed a former Planned Parenthood worker that says, this is our bread and butter now, giving out not just giving out hormones to teenagers.
So crazy. I mean, and it brings up the issue of consent, because that was one of the primary issues in this UK case. Quincy Bell and also Rand Paul brought it up, but it was, what is the level of consent? They said in that court case in the UK, anything over 16, but under you can't. But here, the way that Levine structures it is that we can just get started without consent, whereas these kids who are younger can't sign contracts. They can't. There's all kinds of stuff they can't do. But get a sex change with irreversible, consequences. Go ahead, fire it up.
Right. And it was very interesting. I was surprised Biden got elected after this, but at his town hall before the election, a woman from Pennsylvania stood up and said, it was very interesting the way she said it. She said, I have 2 daughters. And she knew she didn't have 2 daughters. She obviously had a son and a daughter. And the youngest one, the 8-year-old, is transgender. Right. Meaning he was born a boy and he thinks he's a girl. And I'm very upset about the way Trump is not supporting transgenderism. And Biden said, oh, yes, I would support your 8-year-old,
right.
8-year-old to get all the treatment she needs. I mean, come on. Yeah. I mean, I would, if I were in that audience, I would have stood up and said, this is Munchausen by proxy. Arrest this woman. What she's right. Abusing her child. And everybody's clapping like this is normal. This is child abuse, child mutilation, and
I'm glad,
genital mutilation.
Right.
I mean,
I'm glad.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And I'm glad you said the word arrest, because that actually happened to a woman in the UK who stated that man is a woman, right? She said a woman, the cops came to her house and freaking arrested her. I forgot her name, but I think somebody I know interviewed her, but it's amazing. So that's the reason why a lot of this is happening without public discourse, is because the consequences are severe, very severe. You cannot speak out. So the lack of free speech on this issue and cancel culture and all that stuff is very serious. And you're putting these young kids at risk. I mean, this Kira Bell woman, I mean, they ripped her uterus out. So she's never
it's just, what, and if you object, they say, well, why can't you just live and let live? Why can't you just let girls' bodies be mutilated, children be abused, have permanent damages to their bodies that they may or may not regret? Why can't you just live and let live? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's disgusting. I think it's unbelievable that they would actually target the most vulnerable people, and it's supposedly walk around like, oh, I'm in the highest morality. We're all about respect and dignity and living without fear. And then you're going to take a 12-year-old boy or girl and rip your organs out or whatever.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
They don't have consent. I'm sorry, 12, 13.
No, they can't consent. And I wonder what the ramifications are if I think what's going to happen is if the Equality Act is passed, and I think it will be passed, unfortunately, it's going to put women and girls back 150 years as far as our rights. I think what's going to happen is a lot of good doctors are going to retire because they won't take part in this. And I think that the doctors that go along with it for fear of losing their license are going to have lawsuits years later from people like Kira Bell, who say, my body is mutilated. I've had a double mastectomy. My mother has 2 friends with quote unquote transgender grandchildren. And one was given a double mastectomy as a graduation gift from college. The mutilation of her female body was the gift.
Wow, that's sick.
Sick,
kind
right?
of feel nauseous. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a disgrace. I mean, it's just so sad. It's a disgrace that these people are pushing that out there like it's some kind of... and that's the way they turn it. They sugarcoat it. Oh, that's so great and all this stuff. And I heard somebody argue that like the transgender community can't procreate. So they have to go after the most vulnerable to increase their number size, right? Mm-hmm. So I've heard that. I mean, that might be one of their incentives too.
I know some trans activists have said that only transgender women should use women's bathrooms to protect them from biological women.
Yeah. Some of these things are hard to wrap your head around. It's just unbelievable.
Right. I mean, they've normalized as far as why I would refuse to adapt any of this language. That's the other thing I've been criticized for is for not using the quote unquote appropriate pronouns. But the trans activists don't have any problem with calling me things that I find extremely offensive, like cis, menstruator,
heteronormative, whatever, these weird terms.
I mean, I find
pejorative type terms. Yeah,
they literally made the word cis woman, right, to instead to identify biological women from women with penises. Okay, and those other women, sense. Right?
Come on.
I mean, it's absolutely absurd, and I would love a poll in this country. They've guilted the heck out of women in this country. I'd love to see. I think I'm really feeling kind of down and like they're a lost cause on this issue.
Well, I think
I'm really relying on men like Rand Paul to stand up because I really applaud the women that have spoken out, like Julie Bindel, Kelly Jean Keaton Mitchell, otherwise known as Posey Parker. I know I'm missing a whole bunch of women, Abigail Shire, but I'm not minimizing their work. But in America, I think almost everybody I listed there was English. Besides for a few, most women have been silent, including old school feminists who've gone along with it, who say, that's yes, surprising. Definitely. Gloria Steinem, yes, trans women are women. I completely support it. I've always hated Gloria Steinem anyway, but
I would figure that the feminist, like a true, right. I mean, a true dyed-in-the-wool feminist would think that transgenderism is a threat to femininity and what a woman is. I would think that they would be right at the forefront, especially because they're so often outspoken for their, feminist viewpoint. Like you would think, like, hey, you got to protect these women. And I don't perceive that.
Well, the feminist movement, I think I explained this in my email, got taken over by pro-pornography, pro-prostitution, pro-sexualizing yourself, also pro-murderer, interestingly, like supporting people like the Women's March supported Assata Shakur. So
that's weird. How did that happen?
Basically they just very satanically, as you would, I think it's, inverted it and said, basically all the things that you're fighting against are really feminist ideals. And also surrogacy, very pro-surrogacy, which is something the renting of our wombs, something I'm against, and as being pushed. We just got very liberal surrogacy laws in New York City, by the same guy who made walking while trans. He called this a walking while trans, which basically lets prostitutes loiter on the streets of New York. They're calling it a win for transgender rights, that transvestite or transgender prostitutes can loiter and walk the streets of New York. And that puts them at danger. I don't know how that's a right for their equality. It's awful for prostitution is awful, no matter who it's happening to.
For the man or woman, it's
right, men or women. Yeah. But it basically happens to women,
right.
Mostly. Our bodies are rented, used,
right.
exploited. And this is a guy who's had a gay guy, Brad Holman, who's had 2 girls by surrogacy. And then he changed the laws to make it more easy to rent our wombs and just commodify our bodies. It's disgusting.
It's disgusting.
It's really all this is really rooted in deep woman hating. It's
the value of the female, at least if it's, man becoming a woman. It's like it's getting rid of the sanctity and the value of a natural woman, I think is what it is what they're trying to erase.
Right. And what's interesting in the trans activist community, where are the trans identified women? They're not at the forefront. They're nowhere because nobody looks at them and thinks that they're a man too.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's so obvious. Yeah. I mean,
nobody, and they have no power because they're women. I don't say that it's not possible for women to have power in this country. We've come a long way, but you know what I mean? In that community, men rule it. They've always run it.
The interesting kind of wordplay that comes to my mind is in this trans issue is transvaluation of all values. Like you're literally taking the old values in a very cynical, subversive way and reevaluating them. And I think that that's very scary, truly, because it's being done just off the cuff by people who say, this is what I believe in. If you don't believe me, I will cancel you. I will incinerate your whole life. So I think that element, that philosophical, basic understanding of words is under assault, which never ends up well. Yeah.
I really encourage people to stop using gender and sex interchangeably because that's the beginning of it.
Yeah,
that's the beginning of it.
I totally agree with that. And I wouldn't even call these, I think it's a mistake to call a transgender person a woman or a man. They're not inherent. Those inherent characteristics aren't there. I'm sorry. And I think it's external. So my position is not like, and I have no problem competing against anybody else. If you want to do sports, if you want to be in your own group or whatever, trans groups, and go drinking by yourself or whatever, no problem with that. But I think you're not a woman. Sorry. If you're a man going to a woman and you go through all that stuff, you're just not a woman. So anyway.
This is just the most, depressing, sad issue.
It's sad. And I think you got to go back to psychology of the people who were involved in wanting to push this forward as kind of progressivism and as, something really beneficial, and go, what's your real goal? Are you really interested in this other person's beneficial well-being? Because to me, it's like you're putting them through torture. It's really kind of like the Island of Dr. Moreau or something. Literally cutting women's boobs off. Like, whoa.
Right. It's straight up genital mutilation. And if I were, every 13, 14-year-old girl, or a majority of them, hates their breasts when they get them, So, now you have an option
to
opt out on it. But boy is the advertisement not honest on what you're really getting.
Yeah, it's scary days. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up or anything like that? Anybody have any questions out there? Let's see, what's this? What does it say about elected Republicans that they don't make a major issue out of this? It just shows that they're spineless. I mean, at least Rand Paul showed some spine, in my opinion. But I don't hear many other Republicans. Definitely some of these right-wing foundations are heritage.org is talking about it. think they had an article saying Rand Paul is right. Transgender interventions for kids can include genital mutilation. That's from February 26, 2021.
I mean, in New York, it's just absolutely gone crazy. And, they're asking you if you're non-binary. But asking you if you're male, female, or non-binary. If you to get the COVID shot. I mean, what does that have to do with, they've just embraced this all the way. And the whole sexual harassment training is, that's a whole nother issue, but it's not, about 70% about gender identity and being assigned your sex at birth, not observed, not like the doctor observed your sex, but it was assigned.
Did you read
like you just flipped a coin?
Right. Did you read any of the Gina Carano stuff, the background? She had an interview with Ben Shapiro, and that one of the things that she kind of jokingly wrote on Twitter was her gender was Bing Bang Bong or something, and kind of making fun of it. And they literally showed up with like a full-on army of people to see why she said that. So they really sniffed her out, and she had to sit down, and it was almost like going into room 101 or something. Like, why do you think that? Well, and then they said, well, we don't think that you had any animus or any hate toward anybody. And she's like, yeah, I don't, but there's only two genders, and that, people's heads.
Well, there's only two sexes, definitely biological sexes. Right. Gender and the performing of femininity or masculinity is certainly more, pliable, right? So it's just ridiculous, and I think they'll shame the heck out of anybody who speaks up on this issue.
Just speaking about it, yeah.
I mean, this issue. I mean, in all seriousness, before last night, I'm not going to go into what it was, but I had the worst nightmare, knowing we were going to talk about this, because this is a issue that's caused real heartache in my personal family life. And really divided a lot of my friends, and had lots of arguments about this, because I think it's also that team issue, that if you're a Democrat, then you want to be Team Democrat and embrace the whole platform and get on board everything and think they're all great, not creating all this absolute catastrophe and destruction with what they're pushing through.
Catastrophe. It should be like a slow rolling bomb. You wouldn't feel the consequences for another decade or two, but just the wreckage will be incalculable. In my opinion, it'd just be terrible. Even if you had 100 or 1,000 kids go through it, their lives are, change. You just don't know. Like, you don't know what happens in people's lives. If you make those the irredeemable changes, no going back, It's just like, the feeling of loss. Some of those women will never have children. That might be something that their minds change when they're 25, I don't know. Like, I'm never having children. I've heard tons of people say when they're 16 or 17, never having children. Women saying that, men. And they come around 25, 30, they see some other friends having, they think, hey, man, this is what's going to make me happy is my offspring, and they can't. So those changes do happen as you get older. So, and
it's an incredibly powerful, beautiful thing that
profound,
we're gifted with.
Gladness, joy, everything, fulfillment, tons. So, that's scary to have somebody like Rachel Levine making that decision for a 12-year-old kid, and making
decisions for women
too. Yeah. No, it's super dangerous, man. I'm terrified by that. Like, you had a nightmare. I feel like I'm looking at a nightmare. So I wish people well. I don't know what to say. I just hope that they're really informed, and their parents don't feel like they have to go along through with it to be a good Democrat or whatever, to be part of the party. And that doesn't have positive connotations to me. Like, I'm a member of the party, capital P, hey, that's why I'm an independent, man. I think independent. I'm more than happy about that. So,
well, they put up a big poster and signs all over England of the dictionary definition of women, which is adult human female, and that was taken down for transphobia. Okay.
Right.
So
when
the dictionary definition of women, the word woman is now transphobic. Think it really is a woman-hating ideology. This is mandated, government-approved push, woman-hating, and also child abuse.
Yeah, no doubt. Both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like tinkering with things. It's almost like I'm going to play God. There's that kind of element to me, like, oh, I can change this, and I know it's just better than, what's been happening for the last millennia, untold millennia of human existence. I can put my imprint on that, and people.
Damien Eccles is guilty.
Yeah,
he is guilty, but he is welcome at the New York Public Library anytime. Red carpet.
Yeah, where else is it? What else is going on with Damien Eccles? I haven't. He seems to be being on, still doing his magic thing on YouTube, I guess. I think his probation ends this year, August, right? So
yeah, and I'm going to be really sad when his probation ends because I like calling him twice convicted child killer on probation. I'm going to be sad when he's off probation. I can't define him that way anymore.
He'll
honestly,
always be a convicted child killer. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else?
I will tell you something about the state of our world when the New York Public Library welcomes him, but not a bunch of women, middle-aged women, discussing their rights.
Unbelievable, man. It's upside down world. It's very scary. Like, especially the lack of free speech. I think people are giving that up. Very. It's
and I'm also disappointed, on the media that's coming out on the right. Even someone like Andy No, who's covering Antifa, and he's, referring to all these men doing violence wearing dresses as women. And it's basically obscuring male violence. It's very distressing on all sides. He thinks he's being politically correct, but I find that abhorrent. And
do you really think that he's on the right? I haven't read it. Have you read his new book?
He calls himself center right. I've read, I'm about 3/4 of the way through his book. It's excellent on Antifa. But, every time he posts up, this person got arrested, this is a transgender woman, and she did this crime. So he's just obscuring male violence. I think I'm sad that he's not stronger. I don't know what kind of pressures he has, but that's on his Twitter too, in his book and on his Twitter, and on the Post Millennial, for which he writes.
Post Millennial, I've never even heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, hopefully Rachel Levine will not be. She's probably going to be approved, right?
He'll go through. I'd love to talk to his wife and kids, his ex-wife and kids. I'd love to find out. This guy should be making no decisions about children, none, or women, or anyone's health. And the fact that he won't talk about it is concerning,
to say the least,
and upsetting. Yeah. We should be able, if you believe so much in this, you should be able to state your position. What the heck?
Right. That's the whole response. That canned response was terrible. Yeah.
It was awful. Good for Rand Paul. He's been excellent on this issue. And also on women and girls sports. And he's really, kudos to him on this issue.
So again, it's Roberta Glass. Go check out True Crime Report. You are on YouTube and your podcast, right? So,
yeah.
Right. Any updates you want to have had? Any guests or anything?
Well, Marty Tankleff is coming up next because he's Keith Ranieri's new lawyer. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So that's going to be exciting.
Look forward to that show. I will check that out. Again, Roberta Glass, subject is transgenderism. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care.